Canto 15 of Purgatorio. In the first three levels of Purgatorio proper, where the sins of pride, envy, and wrath are purged, vision becomes more and more limited. The prideful are forced to look down and to the side by the weight they carry on their shoulders. The envious have their eyes sewn shut to limit their ability to look upon external goods that they might desire. Finally, beginning here in the 15th canto, smoke so fills the air that the wrathful are blinded by their rage, and they cannot see the objects of their anger. The pilgrim often shares in this progressive blindness as he assumes the habits of the penitents for his own spiritual journey. But as we will recognize, where external vision is limited or entirely absent, insight becomes possible. Nowhere else in these canti, and indeed in the whole of the poem, does this limited vision figure so importantly than here in Canto 15, where Dante begins and ends this canto in blindness. This is a canto of transition, as the pilgrim passes from the second level of envy to the third level, which is dedicated to the sin of wrath. As the canto opens, Dante is leaving behind the envious when he is overcome by a blindness brought upon by the overwhelming radiance of the angel custodian of this level. Here are verses 7 through 12. When sunlight struck directly at our faces, for we had circled so much of the mountain that now we headed straight into the west, then I could feel my vision overcome by radiance greater than I'd sensed before, and uncounted things left me amazed. Blinded and amazed by the light, Dante the pilgrim seeks to shade his eyes to see the source of such overwhelming light. But it is only Virgil's explanation that will let Dante know that he must move towards this light in order to receive the angel's absolution, necessary so that he can progress to the next steps on his journey, the next level of wrath. This pattern, blindness repeated and resolved by an explanation that restores vision through knowledge, often in philosophical terms, will dominate this canto and the next. The subject of these discourses centers on the role of love and desire in guiding our actions. This is part of a larger discussion of free will at the center of the Divine Comedy, with Canto 15 and Canto 16 being at the exact center, the 49th and 50th of the 100 canti of the poem. In this canto, Virgil explains that generosity is the opposite of envy, because sharing of spiritual goods, such as the love of God or respect for others, increases one's own possession of that same good, while envy comes from the desire to acquire and be jealous of another's material goods. These goods diminish when divided, such as wealth or power. Or as Virgil says in verses 49 through 57, for when your longings center on things such that sharing them apportions less to each, then envy stirs in your heart the bellow of your sighs. But if love within the highest sphere should turn your longings heavenward, the fear inhabiting your breast would disappear. For there, the more there are who would say ours, so much greater is good possessed by each. So much more love burns in that cloister. After Virgil has restored Dante's sight by answering his questions about the nature of envy, they move on to wrath. Here, quite suddenly, Dante experiences three ecstatic visions, again in another drama of blindness and insight. These visions introduce the virtue of meekness or gentleness, the opposite of the vice of wrath. In quick succession, Dante sees or experiences, in the typical mix of classical and Christian exempli of Purgatorio, the gentleness of Mary with Jesus, the gentleness of Pisistratus for his daughter's suitor, and the gentleness of Saint Sebastian, a Roman soldier who turned Christian and was made a martyr. Dante emerges from these visions to find Virgil confused. Here verses 115 through 123. And when my soul returned outside itself and met the things outside it that are real, I then could recognize my not false errors. My guide, on seeing me behave as if I were a man who's freed himself from sleep, said, "What is wrong with you? You can't walk straight. For more than half a league now you've moved with clouded eyes and lurching legs, as if you were a man with whom wine or sleep had gripped." While Virgil almost always has all the answers, in the case of these visions, he seems to be left out. Dante, in turn, has received the lesson of meekness from another higher power, which is altogether unfamiliar to Virgil. These visions, or as Dante calls them, not false errors, are emblematic of the hierarchy of knowledge that marks Purgatorio and the poem itself. The wisdom and reason that Virgil offers are primary to Dante's advancement in hell and also here in Purgatorio. However, as Virgil himself notes in this canto, when he refers Dante to a further teaching by Beatrice in paradise, his own knowledge, Virgil's own knowledge, is limited. Dante's journey will need to progress beyond Virgil to attain still greater truths. Canto 15 offers us a moment to reflect upon the different journeys to understanding illustrated by Dante in his poem. Throughout his journey, he is frustrated by apparent obstacles, in this case, blindness. Yet thanks to his guide Virgil and to the divine grace through Beatrice, which allows him to have those ecstatic visions, he may continue his journey, enriched by the insight he has received by being forced by blindness to look within himself.